All right, we are talking Circa Million, NFL Week 3 coming up. We are recording this on Thursday afternoon, mere hours before Giants and 49ers kick off the week with Thursday Night Football. If we want to include that game in our Circa Million entry, we got to get that entry submitted within the next few hours here. So who else better than Brandon Kravitz to help me break down Week 3? Well, we'll continue to have a rotation of guests throughout the year, kind of bouncing ideas off of each other as we try to do as well as we can in the Circa Million contest. Brandon, we have you on the radio show all the time. You're a big podcast presence for us here at RotoWire, one of my favorite football minds to speak with. Appreciate you stopping by to help me talk some Week 3.
Of all the conversations that you and I have had, most of them have revolved around storylines or fantasy. Very rarely have we really dug into the spreads together. So this is a turning of a new page for you and I. I'm excited about this.
Yeah, man, let's get right into it. Those of you who've been following along the last couple of weeks, you should know we are sitting right at 500 right now. We're 4-2-2. We got just shafted last week, Brandon, on a couple of pushes. We had the Green Bay Packers +1. They, of course, end up losing that game by 1, despite leading by 12 early in the fourth quarter. We had the New Orleans Saints to cover 3. Not only did they give up a late touchdown to Carolina, they also give up the 2-point conversion. So that one pushed as well. Did win on the Kansas City Chiefs covering. I think that number closed at 3 against Jacksonville. But we got to bounce back. I feel like having 2 ties is almost worse than losing those 2 games.
I can't go that far because losing, you officially lose your money. At least in a push, you get it back. But I understand Nobody wants that. You're going out for the dubs, and if you don't get that, then everything feels like less than the win. So yeah, in some ways, you're right.
I think in more ways you're right. Mathematically, you're definitely correct. As far as this contest goes, you'd rather take a tie than you would have lost. So we're okay at 500 through 2 weeks. Need to pick it up, of course, if we want to get our hands on, I think it's $6 or $7 million that are at stake. And I believe it's $14 million between Circa Million and Circa Survivor this year. Interesting board in Week 3. Weeks 1 and 2, John and I, we kind of scratched and clawed to find 5 games that we like. It's going to be like that basically every week, right? These in theory are 50-50 propositions, but the board in Week 3 looks a lot different than it did in Week 2. We got a bunch of, high number favorites, double-digit favorites, starting with the Chiefs at home against the chaos that is the Chicago Bears franchise. We got the Dallas Cowboys taking on the Arizona Cardinals. Jags get the Texans. How do you attack a week like this that has 4 or 5 games, where that spread is sitting at least 9 points?
I wish I liked some of these double-digit underdogs a little bit more, but I'm scared off by what I've seen over the first couple of weeks. There's only one that I find myself really drawn to, and that's the Houston Texans, who are sitting right now at +9. I like the way that they've been, their passing game has been evolving over the last couple of weeks. CJ Stroud, it looks like he's going to play. I like them a lot less if he doesn't, but even if he doesn't, Davis Mills has shown that he can cover a spread. We've at least seen that. And what have the Jags done through 2 games that have made us think they can cover a 9-point spread? They do not deserve to be 9-point favorites. One of my go-to betting philosophies, Nick, is avoid irresponsible favorites. And I think the Jags fall into that bucket. But I have a feeling you disagree with me.
I do. And it's not because I'm impressed with what I've seen from the Jaguars by any means. I mean, this is an offense that has been completely stuck in the mud through 2 weeks. They're making everything way more difficult than it needs to be. You're in the red zone multiple times against Kansas City, and instead of running the ball, instead of trying anything in the middle of the field, you're relying on Trevor Lawrence to place the ball perfectly. And then you're asking your receivers to, basically have 1 inch of space to get both feet down, and look, it's easier said than done, especially against a good defense like Kansas City. But I think they've been overcoached offensively thus far. And at some point they're going to simplify things and get back to the team that they were over the second half of last season. And look, if you can't do that against Houston at home, I don't know when that's happening. Houston, by the way, will be without Derek Stingley, arguably their best defensive player, certainly their best defensive back, which is huge in this game. I mean, we would have seen a lot of Derek Stingley chasing Calvin Ridley around, chasing Christian Kirk around. I think that is a huge, huge minus for a Houston defense that was already pretty shaky. To me, last week felt like a wake-up call. You saw it in the post-game presser, right? I mean, Trevor Lawrence is not usually that guy who's frustrated, who's saying the things that he said in that press conference. I think they know something needs to change, and I think that happens this week against Houston. I'm not saying we have to include this in Circa. And by the way, if you're new, we got to pick 5 games against the number each week. So it's not like we have to bet all these games, but narrowing it down to that 5 is difficult. I'm not saying Jacksonville has to be in there, but I wouldn't feel great about including Houston either, especially with CJ Stroud dealing with that shoulder.
So that's just the one that I like the most of those big fat underdogs. But I get it, and the injuries do matter. The Texans, we saw this last week. I was actually on them against the Indianapolis Colts, and
So was I.
they put together quite the effort late in that game, but they dug too big a hole for themselves. They could very well do that against this Jacksonville Jaguars offense. So they scare me, but there's a reason why all of these teams, the Bears and the Cardinals, there's a reason why they're double-digit underdogs, is because things can avalanche quickly for these teams. Should we like the Arizona Cardinals more, though? Because they're 2-0 against the spread. All they've been doing is covering, and nobody's really trying to get in on that. I know it's Dallas, and you talk about a team that defensively can get after you and make things ugly quick, but Arizona, this team might be better. Not in the win-loss column, but in the competitiveness angle, they might be better than we're giving them credit for. And
they certainly have been. They've been that way through 2 weeks. We can't take anything away from them. Like you said, they're 2-0 against the spread. They absolutely should have beat the Giants. I think you could make the case that they should have beat the Commanders as well. Part of me thinks that like that bubble's going to burst at some point, though. It's like we know what this roster is, right? And I guess it's possible that every single person misevaluated the Cardinals, and they're actually way better than we thought they were. But typically in these situations, the teams that we think are going to be really bad almost always regress to that level, right? It almost reminds me of the start that the Utah Jazz got off to this NBA season, where you're thinking, all right, do we have to just pencil this team in as a playoff team in the West? And as the year went along, the Jazz started to look more and more like the Jazz that we thought they would be. Some of that was their own doing, and I think we could see that with the Cardinals as well. To me, this is just kind of a worst case matchup, right? You look at the two teams that they hung in with over the first 2 weeks. Like you caught the Commanders, I think, at a pretty good time. Sam Howell basically making his first real start. I thought Sam Howell was like half concussed early in that game, took a huge hit, didn't really look like himself after that. And then you catch a Giants team coming off of a 40-0 blowout that seemingly carried over into the first half against Arizona. Like, all due respect to the Commanders, I think they're a decent team. Obviously, the Giants won a playoff game last year. Those teams are on a completely different level than the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, and all of that's fair. I do like the fact that you're getting a 12.5-point home underdog. That's not something that you can say about some of these other big dogs. If you want to take the Bears, they're going on the road to Arrowhead. That's a tough place to play. Their offense is in shambles. There's no way they're stopping Kansas City, who still needs that get-right game offensively. So that one, I'm not willing to go there. I do have about 5 that I like, but I feel like we're almost playing process of elimination at this point.
Well, let me ask you this. I want to include one of the big favorites because, I'm a wuss and I like including big favorites. I want the team that I feel is dramatically better than the other. So if we were to take Cowboys minus 12.5 or Chiefs minus 13 against the Bears, 49ers minus 10.5 against the Giants, or Jags minus 9 against the Texans, which of those 4 do you trust the most?
I think I would go with tonight.
Okay.
Daniel Jones with that bad offensive line and no Saquon Barkley to hand the ball off to, and the drop off from Barkley to Matt Breida and whoever else is in that backfield is a stark difference. So I think they're really going to struggle to get in the end zone. I don't think they're going to be able to score more than 1 touchdown in this game, and San Francisco can beat you in so many different ways. I know Ayuk is still questionable, but they have so many other options, and Christian McCaffrey looks like he is in midseason form right now. I think this team right now feels like the best team in the NFL, and usually another general rule of thumb is when in doubt, take the favorite on Thursday night. It's a good spot, especially if you're at home on a short week. Things are usually simplified in practice, so I think 49ers minus 10.5 among the big favorites makes me feel the most cozy inside.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to fall into the trap of, oh man, things are going wrong for the Giants. Short week for them as well. It's like, well, it's also a short week for San Francisco. The Giants did stay out on the West Coast, but I'm with you, man. I think even if San Francisco, comes out a little bit slow, plays like a C- game offensively, they still probably win this by 13. I mean, not only is Saquon Barkley out, but your best offensive lineman, Andrew Thomas, is ruled out of this game. You got a center on IR. You got another guard on IR. Your backup left guard's also injured and out for this game too. So I think it could be oversimplified to say they're going to struggle without Saquon Barkley, and they will. But I think the issues that they have on that offensive line going up against Nick Bosa, to me, that's the bigger problem for the Giants. So I'm with you. I like that. Maybe we'll go with the early submission deadline at Circa and include the 49ers minus 10.5. You said you got a whole pocket full of games that you like, Brandon. Let's rifle through those.
Okay, so the one that I circled first and foremost is and it goes against the grain for my own fandom, but when you're talking betting, the only fandom you should have is winning. So I'm a Dolphins fan. I'll put that one out there. Broncos plus 6.5 is a phenomenal bet. The look ahead line on this one was Fins minus 3.5. And what have the Dolphins done to earn 3 more points of respect? They went toe to toe with a really bad defense in the LA Chargers, and they almost were taken to overtime on the road against the New England Patriots, who can't move the football. Tua looks really good. He deserves all the praise that he's getting right now. This team is too big a favorite in this matchup, going up against an offense that we know can move the football. So the back door will be wide open all throughout the course of this game. Russell Wilson and Sean Payton, over the course of their careers, when they lose back-to-back games, they're almost a dead lock to cover the very next game. So I like them here. They haven't gone on the road yet. So I'm not worried about all that fatigue and travel, because I just don't think that at this point in the season, that kind of stuff is caught up to you yet. Broncos plus 6.5 feels like an incredible value.
Yeah, that number is in an uncomfortable spot for me. If it was 4.5, I think I would really like Miami here. And we should mention, Jalen Waddle didn't practice Wednesday. He did not practice on Thursday as well. And you take him away from that offense, it's not as big a deal as being without Tyreek Hill, but it's still something that makes you think twice. And, I think the reason this line has moved so much, and I'm with you, it's probably moved a little bit too much, is the Denver defense has just looked terrible, right? I think the offense has actually looked a little bit better than I expected, right? If you watch the first half against the Commanders the other day, I mean, that was as close to old Russell Wilson as we've seen. And, we kind of gradually regressed as that game went along. But, this was a top 5 defense for a good chunk of last season. And, they were keeping the Broncos in every game. The offense couldn't do anything. It felt like they were losing every week, like 17-13. And that was because the defense was playing really, really well. That just has not been there so far. Obviously was not there in the second half against the Raiders, was not there really at all against the Commanders in the second half. So I think people saw what Sam Howell and the Washington Commanders did to the Broncos defense in the second half last week and said, okay, if that's what Sam Howell could do, what can Tua do?
Right. And that's where I think public perception is really starting to lean heavy on the Miami side, because they've done every little thing that they need to do to earn respect to this point in the season. But what we haven't seen them really do with consistency is stop good quarterback play. Now, we only have a 2-game sample size, but Justin Herbert was able to move the ball down the field at will, and they haven't really been able to stop the run. At least they didn't against LA. And I think that that's something that they're going to lean on quite a bit with Javonte Williams. So that kind of stuff will keep you in the game. I don't like Miami to run away with this one like a lot of people assume that they would. Okay. And we haven't seen a bad Tua game yet. Right. Let's also be honest, that is coming at some point.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, this has been a best case scenario start for Tua. So, okay, we'll put that one to the side for now. I know John likes the Broncos as well. I'm a little bit more skittish on that, but I think you guys could talk me into that one off air. Can I sell you on the Tennessee Titans plus 3.5 at the Cleveland Browns?
I am always willing to hear about Mike Vrabel as an underdog.
I love this line, right? I mean, I'm a Jags fan. I don't like the Titans at all. Going all the way back to 1999 when the Jags lost 3 games and they were all to the Titans, and the Titans went to the Super Bowl that year, thankfully lost to the Rams. I don't root for this team, but we've seen this situation play out like 5-6 times a year. It feels like Titans, they're 3-point underdogs. They're 3.5-point underdogs. You look at the situation, they're going on the road, maybe they have some injuries, which is really not the case right now for Tennessee, but every time you want to count the Titans out, they find a way to hang around in these games. And, I don't want to put too much stock into the Nick Chubb injury, but he's on the very short list of running backs in this league that I think really matter for their team, right? I think that's been the big debate for the last few years, is how much do running backs matter. You can't look around and say that the Cleveland Browns are basically the same team with Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt as they were with Nick Chubb. I mean, the way Nick Chubb was carving up the Pittsburgh Steelers before that injury on Monday night, I think that's a big deal. And I think you're asking a lot for a team to kind of reconfigure its offense without its best player on the fly on a short week. So I think there's a lot to like about the Titans here, especially getting the hook on the 3.5. Mike Vrabel, as we know, 23-9-1 against the spread when he's an underdog of 3 points or more, 23-22 straight up as an underdog as the Titans head coach. Meanwhile, Kevin Stefanski just 10-19 ATS as a favorite during his tenure with the Cleveland Browns. As I mentioned, Titans have the rest advantage here. I think these are two similar teams, two similarly limited offenses in some ways, two similar defenses. Defensive line is the strength for both of these teams. If you're giving me 3.5 with the Titans, I'm taking it.
And let's also keep in mind the strength of the Cleveland Browns is running the football. That's the strength of the Tennessee defense. So they should be able to stop them at what they're best at. To me, this bet is as much against Deshaun Watson as it is anything else. He has looked putrid, and I don't really see that changing all of that much. The one concern I have here is that that offensive line for the Tennessee Titans is really bad. So this could go south for that reason, but backing Mike Vrabel as an underdog always feels like a good idea. I think we should write that one in.
Okay, we'll pencil that one in for now. Give me one or two other games that you're leaning toward.
So I love the Commanders plus 6.5 at home against the Buffalo Bills here. We saw the Bills go back home against the Raiders, and they blew out a bad team at home in their home opener. Big shock there. To me, this matchup comes down to offensive line versus defensive line. The Bills' offensive line has not been able to consistently protect Josh Allen over the last year. They're going up against a really good defensive front in the Washington Commanders, and to me, this is not fluky. When Ron Rivera, he's done this over the course of his coaching career, when he gets buy-in from his players, he tends to build off of that rather than things regressing quickly. So I like the fact that they've won their first two games. I'm not looking at the Commanders like they're inflated in terms of their value. I think it's more coming from the Bills side because they're coming off of that blowout. Sam Howell's played really good brand of football through two games, so I think they can cover this number at home.
Yeah, I saw a good stat at the Action Network earlier today that Ron Rivera, coming off of a straight-up win as an underdog, he is 25-9-1 against the spread in the following game, and he's 12-4-1 against the spread when he's a dog again. After winning that game as an underdog in the previous week. So there are some trends here that push you toward the Commanders. I'm with you. I just wonder which version of the Bills we get. I took the Commanders in our staff picks article. I don't feel that strongly about it. Obviously the Bills are on the road here. It's a fairly short road trip. We've seen two versions of the Bills. We've seen the bad version of Josh Allen in week one. We saw a much more controlled, run-heavy version of that offense in week two. I think if they could stick to that and Josh Allen comes out of this game with one or fewer turnovers, the Bills probably win by at least a touchdown. But that variance is there. And I think if the Commanders' defensive line could get to Josh Allen, could force him, into some of those off-schedule plays, that's where the Commanders are going to have the advantage here. And to me, the Commanders' offense, I think, has been a little undervalued so far just because of how it looked for much of week one. But if you watch that second half against Denver, man, that was the Sam Howell we saw during the preseason.
Yeah, that was just a really bad spot for the Raiders last week. I still have my questions about the Bills. I don't think they deserve to be 6.5-point road favorites at this stage. My last one that I absolutely love is the Bucs Monday Night Football plus 5 going up against a banged up Eagles secondary that is not the part of your defense that you want at less than 100% going up against Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Baker Mayfield, the bottom's going to fall out at some point, but it hasn't yet. So I'm just going to kind of cross my fingers and hope that this isn't the week that happens. It's another strength on strength matchup as well. The Eagles love to run the football. The Bucs are number 2 against the run, and that's not a fluke. They've been doing that for the last couple of years with the talent on that defense. So at home, I like them plus 5.
I like that one too. I do. And, I can't shake this feeling that at some point the Eagles are going to snap back to being the 2022 Eagles. I still
Always
think that's
possible.
in there. Yeah. And it's is this the week that happens? And I think conversely, is this the week that Baker Mayfield snaps back to being the guy that he's been for the last decade? So that to me is the biggest concern is how long can Baker Mayfield ride this streak of playing turnover-free football? Because there's no stretch like this in his career where this is just sustained, for 3, 4, 5, 6 games in a row. So you feel like that's coming around at some point, but like you said, a lot of injuries on the defensive side of the ball for the Eagles. You still have a pair of running backs in Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott banged up as well. Philly's pass defense has been terrible through 2 weeks. We saw Kirk Cousins throw all over them a week ago, and saying Baker Mayfield could do the same just feels so wrong coming out of my mouth. But based on what we've seen from him the last 2 weeks, I don't think he's just a different quarterback all of a sudden, but I also think he's in one of the best situations that he's been in throughout his career. Part of the reason that Baker Mayfield has not been a very good NFL starting quarterback is he's just not been in very many good situations. He's never really had weapons like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin alongside him.
This is just the hardest part with picking these games, especially as we get into week 3, and next week will be like that too. Are you making your picks and predictions based off of what you've seen already or
Right.
what will eventually come around, and trying to time that out perfectly? So I think that you got to pick your spots. Nothing's universal when we talk about this stuff, but I like what I've seen from Tampa so far. They've given me no reason not to feel good about what they're putting out there.
All right, I want to do like 30 seconds on 2 more games, and I'll let you go, Brandon. How are we handling Rams-Bengals? These lines lock at Circa. They come out, around noon on Thursday. They don't change with the markets from here on out. These numbers are locked in. We're getting the Rams at +3. We have no idea if Joe Burrow is going to play for the Bengals.
Yeah. If you have to pick that one, you got to go Rams, because if Burrow doesn't play, that is the bargain of all bargains. And this goes back to something I just said. If you're taking Cincinnati, you're betting on a bounce back that has not occurred yet. This team has looked really bad over the course of 2 weeks, and the Rams look fully functional. So I know they lost to the 49ers last week, but the 49ers look like the best team in the NFL. So no harm, no foul there. It's not like the Rams played poorly. The San Francisco 49ers just played well. Yeah. So you got to go Rams.
The way I look at it, like Joe Burrow could be like that reoccurrence of the calf injury could have never happened. And I still think this is a shaky spot for Cincinnati. And now you're telling me there's at least a 50% chance he doesn't play. And if he does, he's probably going to be pretty severely hampered. Like I'm leaning pretty heavily toward including the Rams, given this situation. I think there's a very good chance that we're getting the Jake Browning Cincinnati Bengals during that game on Monday night.
If that's the case, definitely not. I will say this major revenge game, though, because this is a rematch of the Super Bowl from 2 years ago. The Bengals have had this one circled.
They have. All right, last one, Brandon, that I want to try to sell you on. I've been riding the Falcons hard these first couple of weeks. I was all over their win total. We've talked about it on our various shows. This number locked at 3, Falcons +3. I prefer it at 3.5. I think Atlanta can hang around with Detroit. David Montgomery's banged up. I don't think he's going to play. Amon-Ra St. Brown is banged up. The Lions are without C.J. Gardner-Johnson. On defense, PFF has Detroit as the worst tackling team in the NFL so far. That is not a good recipe when you're going to have to tackle Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier probably 45 combined times with Atlanta trying to run the ball. So I have not been impressed with the Detroit defense. I think the offense certainly has the advantage. You're still dealing with a limited quarterback in Desmond Ridder, but I think Atlanta's going to try to do exactly what it did against Carolina, exactly what it did against Green Bay, run the ball, control the clock, kind of condense this game and keep it within a score.
I just can't get there.
Okay.
Desmond Ridder has gotten this team by, and I've been on Atlanta the last 2 weeks, so that's helped. They've been very kind to me, but I got to get off this train before it completely burns me. Taking Desmond Ridder out of the friendly confines of Mercedes-Benz Stadium, this guy's not any good. He is not a real NFL quarterback. I just can't trust him on the road in this situation. And the Lions have sky-high expectations this year. This is really a must-win spot for them. And in a lot of ways, it's a must-smash spot to get that confidence back that they had going into the season and then coming off of that win in week 1. This is a big opportunity for them. I like them a lot better if Amon-Ra St. Brown plays because they'll be able to pack that punch offensively. I'm sorry. It's a good number for Atlanta. I just can't get there with them.
This is a complete sidebar, but should the Falcons trade for Justin Fields?
Yeah. Yes.
I kind of like it, right? I kind of like it.
Yeah. I'm in on that.
All right. Yeah. We don't need to spend another 10 minutes on that. But before we head out, we got a message from our friends over at Circa. We always enjoy going out there each summer for the RotoWire annual trip. It's football season at Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas, featuring the best pool in history, Stadium Swim. 3 levels, 6 pools, and a 143-foot diagonal screen. Stadium Swim is America's favorite place to watch football. They play every game from college to the pros. You can catch all the action poolside from a variety of seating options, including everything from cozy day beds to private temperature-controlled cabanas. Brandon, you know all about those. Stadium Swim, located at Circa Resort and Casino. It's open 365 days a year. All sports, all seasons. Book today at circalasvegas.com. That's circalasvegas.com. All right, Brandon. Appreciate you joining me, man. Looking forward to locking in these picks. I think we'll include that 49ers -10.5. So we'll get those locked in this afternoon. You'll see the full report when Circa publishes it later this weekend. Big week coming up, man. Of all these picks that we've talked about, what is your absolute favorite one?
Absolute favorite, Commanders +6.5. I have to hop off, Nick. It has been so much fun hanging out with you and talking picks. Let's do it again soon.
All right, will do, man.